The depot lights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly like tired insects clinging to life. One by one, the sounds of the evening faded, the chatter of travelers, the rumble of engines, the shuffle of hurried footsteps. And then came the final sound that made Clara Bennett's heart drop, the last bus pulling away. Its red taillights glowed like distant embers before disappearing into the night, leaving behind a silence so deep it pressed against her chest. Clara stood still for a moment, her fingers tightening around the worn handle of her suitcase. She scanned the empty platform again, hoping, no, expecting, to see him rushing toward her with an apologetic smile. But there was no one. Only empty benches, a rusted vending machine humming in the corner, a torn poster flapping gently against the wall, and the cold. "He said he'd be back," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Her voice sounded small, swallowed by the vast emptiness around her. She sat down slowly on the wooden bench, the chill seeping through her clothes instantly, her eyes fixed on the road where the bus had vanished, as if staring long enough might reverse time. Maybe he got delayed. Maybe something happened. Maybe he's coming. Clara clung to those thoughts, fragile as glass. Just hours ago, everything had felt so certain. She had packed her life into one suitcase, leaving behind her modest teaching job, her small apartment, and the quiet routine she had known for years. It hadn't been easy, but she believed she was stepping into something greater, a new beginning, a future with someone who promised her love, stability, a home. And now? No, she was alone in a deserted depot in a town she barely knew. Her chest tightened as reality began to settle in. Not all at once, but slowly, like a creeping shadow. He wasn't coming back. The thought hit her hard, stealing the air from her lungs. Clara bent forward, elbows on her knees, pressing her palms against her forehead. "No, no, that's not true," she muttered, shaking her head. "He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't just leave me here." But even as she said it, doubt whispered louder. Minutes turned into an hour. The depot clock ticked loudly on the wall, each second echoing like a reminder of her mistake. The temperature dropped as the night deepened, and Clara wrapped her thin cardigan tighter around herself, though it offered little comfort. A stray dog wandered near the entrance, sniffed the ground, and then disappeared into the darkness. Even it didn't stay. Clara swallowed hard, blinking back tears. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. No new messages, no missed calls. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed a message. "Where are you? I'm still at the depot." She stared at the screen, waiting. Nothing. The message showed as delivered, but not read. Her heart sank deeper. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. Then another. Soon, she wasn't trying to hold them back anymore. "I left everything," she whispered, her voice breaking. "For this." She leaned back against the bench, staring up at the flickering light above her. It reminded her of something. Faith. Flickering, unsteady, threatening to go out. "It's Easter," she said softly, almost bitterly. "A night about hope, about new life." Her lips trembled. "So why does this feel like the end?" Silence answered her. For a long moment, Clara just sat there, breathing unevenly, caught between disbelief and heartbreak. Then, slowly, she folded her hands together. It wasn't a polished prayer. It wasn't eloquent, just raw. "God," she began, her voice barely audible. I really thought you were leading me here." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I trusted you. I trusted him. I believed this was right." A tear fell onto her clasped hands. "Did I get it wrong?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. A cold gust of wind swept through the depot, making her shiver. She pulled her suitcase closer, as if it could somehow anchor her. "I don't understand," she continued softly, "but I don't want to lose faith. Not now." Her voice cracked again. "Please, don't leave me here." Clara lowered her hands slowly, her strength fading with the weight of exhaustion. The bench felt harder now, less forgiving. The night stretched endlessly before her. With no other choice, she shifted her suitcase under her head and lay down, curling slightly to keep warm. Her eyes stayed open for a while, watching the flickering light, waiting, hoping. But eventually, the tears, the cold, and the emotional weight pulled her under. And there, in the quiet, forgotten depot, on a night meant to celebrate resurrection, Clara fell asleep, feeling abandoned, not knowing that her story was only just beginning. The night deepened around the depot, wrapping it in a quiet so complete it almost felt alive. Clara stirred slightly on the wooden bench, her body stiff from the cold. And the thin cardigan she wore did little to protect her from the biting air that slipped through the cracks of the old building. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed, long, low, and lonely. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then, it all came rushing back. The bus, the waiting, the silence, the truth. A sharp ache spread through her chest as she pushed herself up slowly, wincing at the discomfort in her neck and shoulders. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold in what little warmth remained. "I'm still here," she whispered. The words sounded strange, like she expected everything to have changed by morning. But the night hadn't moved on. It was still heavy, still cold, still empty. Clara glanced around the depot. Nothing had changed. The same flickering light overhead, at the same empty benches, the same forgotten feeling pressing in from every corner. She pulled her knees closer to her chest and rested her chin against them, staring at the floor. "How did I end up here?" she murmured. Her thoughts replayed everything again. Every choice, every step, every moment that had led her to this place. She had believed in something, believed in love, believed in a future, believed, most of all, that God was guiding her. And now, doubt crept in like a slow-moving shadow. "What if I misunderstood?" she said softly. "What if that wasn't you at all?" The question unsettled her more than anything else. Because if she had been wrong about that, what else had she been wrong about? A sudden gust of wind rattled the loose door near the entrance, making her jump. She hugged herself tighter, her breathing quickening. "I can't do this," she whispered, shaking her head. "I can't stay here all night." But she didn't move, because she didn't know where else to go. Tears welled up again, blurring her vision. She pressed her lips together, trying to hold herself together, but the weight of everything was too much. "I trusted you," she said again, her voice breaking. "I really did." Her hands slowly came together, fingers trembling. This time, she didn't hesitate. "God, are you still here?" she asked quietly. The question lingered in the stillness. "I feel so alone," she continued. "I feel foolish. Like I walked straight into this without thinking." She shook her head, tears falling freely now. "I thought you opened this door for me. I thought this was the life you wanted for me. I thought I wasn't making a mistake." Her shoulders trembled as she let out a shaky breath. "But now I'm here, and everything is gone, and I don't even know what to believe anymore." She paused, her voice softening. "Did I follow you? Or did I just follow what I wanted?" The honesty of the question cut deep. Clara lowered her head, closing her eyes tightly. "I don't want to lose my faith," she whispered. "I don't want this to be the thing that breaks me." A long silence followed. Then, slowly, another memory surfaced. Gentle, steady, familiar. Her mother's voice. Not loud, not forceful. Just calm. Like it always had been. "Clara, faith isn't about always knowing the way. It's about trusting God, even when the road disappears." Clara inhaled sharply, her eyes opening. She hadn't thought about that in years. Her mother used to say things like that when life felt uncertain, when bills were tight, when storms came, when nothing made sense. And somehow, they had always made it through. Clara swallowed, her grip tightening slightly. "But what if I don't feel him?" she whispered. Another memory followed, softer this time. "Even when you cannot see his hand, trust his heart." Tears streamed down her face again, but this time, something was different. They weren't just tears of pain. There was something else mixed in. A flicker of comfort. A small, quiet reminder that she wasn't as alone as she felt. Clara took a deep, shaky breath. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, God. I don't understand this. Not at all." She looked up toward the dim light above her voice steadier now. "But I'm still here. And if you're still here too, then I'm going to try to trust you." Her lips trembled slightly. Even if I don't feel it, even if I don't see anything changing. She paused, then added in a whisper, please, just stay with me. The wind outside softened as if the night itself had exhaled. Clara slowly lay back down on the bench, pulling her suitcase close again. The cold hadn't gone away. The situation hadn't changed. But something inside her had shifted, just slightly. The panic had quieted, the fear had softened, and in its place was a fragile thread of faith. Her eyes grew heavy as exhaustion returned, stronger than before, but this time she didn't fight it. Good night, she murmured faintly. Her breathing slowed, and as sleep gently took hold, Clara no longer felt completely abandoned. Not because her circumstances had changed, but because somewhere deep within her heart, she began to believe that even here, God had not left her. The gravel crunched beneath the tires of Daniel Hayes's truck as he drove down the long, winding road that cut through miles of quiet countryside. The night air was cool and the sky stretched endlessly above him, dark, vast, and scattered with stars that seemed brighter than usual. Easter night. Daniel exhaled slowly, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other tapping lightly against it in thought. The soft hum of the engine filled the cab, blending with the faint sound of a gospel hymn, still echoing in his mind from the evening service. He had stayed longer than usual at church, not because anyone asked him to, but because something about the message had lingered. Resurrection isn't just about what God did, the pastor had said. It's about what he still does, bringing life into places that feel dead. Daniel had nodded at the time, but now, alone on the road, those words seemed to settle deeper. Bringing life into dead places, he muttered. He had seen that before. Years ago, his own life had been one of those places. Broken choices, regret, long nights filled with silence and questions he didn't want to answer. He tightened his grip on the wheel slightly. I know what that feels like, he said quietly. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty road ahead. There were no other cars, no movement, just miles of stillness. It should have been a peaceful drive, but something felt off. Daniel shifted in his seat, and glancing briefly in the rearview mirror before returning his eyes to the road. A strange uneasiness settled in his chest. Not fear, not danger. Something else. A nudge. He frowned slightly. That's odd. He adjusted the radio, but the static only added to the restlessness. With a sigh, he turned it off completely, letting the silence take over. And that's when he felt it again. Stronger this time. Turn back. Daniel blinked, his brow furrowing. What? He said aloud, almost laughing at himself. Turn back where? There was no one around, no reason to stop, no logical explanation for the sudden thought pressing into his mind. He shook his head lightly. You're just tired, he muttered. Long day, that's all. He kept driving, but the feeling didn't leave. If anything, it grew. Turn back. This time, it wasn't just a passing thought. And then it settled deeper, steady, and persistent, like a quiet voice that refused to be ignored. Daniel slowed the truck slightly. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the road ahead. This doesn't make sense, he said under his breath. He wasn't the kind of man who made decisions without reason. Ranch life had taught him practicality. Do what needs to be done, when it needs to be done. And right now, what needed to be done was getting home. But something inside him resisted that logic. He sighed, running a hand over his jaw. All right, he said quietly. Let's think this through. He glanced at the empty fields stretching on either side of the road. There's nothing back there, he continued. Just the depot. And that place closes early? His words trailed off. The depot. The image came into his mind suddenly. Dim lights, quiet benches, the kind of place people passed through, but never stayed. A subtle tension formed in his chest. What if... He started, then stopped. He shook his head again. You're overthinking it. But the thought had already taken root. What if someone needed help? What if someone was there? Alone. Daniel leaned back slightly in his seat, exhaling through his nose. "Lord," he said softly, "if this is you, I'm going to need a little more than a feeling." Silence answered him, but the nudge didn't go away. Instead, it settled into something calm, certain. He slowed the truck further. The headlights swept across a bend in the road as he approached a turnoff. His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "This is crazy," he muttered. He could already picture it, turning around for no reason, driving back, finding nothing. No, and feeling ridiculous for even listening to that instinct. But then again, what if he ignored it? A quiet conviction settled over him. Not loud, not forceful, just clear. Better to turn back and be wrong than drive on and miss something God placed in your path. Daniel let out a slow breath. "All right," he said finally. "All right. I hear you." He flicked on his indicator, though there was no one else on the road to see it, and gently turned the wheel. The truck curved around, gravel crunching as he made a full turn, now heading back. Back toward the depot. Back toward whatever or whoever might be waiting there. Daniel's grip on the wheel loosened slightly, a strange sense of peace replacing the earlier tension. "I don't know what I'm about to find," he admitted quietly, "but I'm listening." The road stretched ahead once more. Familiar, yet different now that his direction had changed. The depot lights appeared faintly in the distance after several minutes, small, flickering against the darkness. Daniel's eyes fixed on them. His heart beat just a little faster. Not from fear, but from anticipation. Something was there. He didn't know what yet, but deep down, he knew this. This wasn't just a detour. It was a moment, and he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The depot stood in near darkness, its flickering lights casting long, uneven shadows across the cracked pavement. The wind had quieted, but the cold remained, sharp and persistent, clinging to everything it touched. Daniel slowed his truck as he pulled in, the headlights sweeping across the empty lot. At first, it looked deserted, just as he had expected. He let the engine idle for a moment, scanning the area carefully. His eyes moved from one corner to another, the benches, the entrance, the vending machine, glowing faintly inside. Nothing. He exhaled, a small, uncertain breath. "Maybe I was wrong," he murmured. His hand hovered near the gear shift. Then, something caught his eye, a shape, small, still, on one of the benches. Daniel leaned forward slightly, narrowing his gaze. "That's not a bag." He quickly turned off the engine, the sudden silence settling heavily around him. Opening the truck door, he stepped out, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. The night air hit him immediately, cold and sharp, but he barely noticed. His focus was fixed on the figure. He approached slowly, cautiously, not wanting to startle whoever it was. As he got closer, the shape became clearer. A young woman, now curled up tightly on the bench, her arms wrapped around herself, her suitcase tucked close, like something she couldn't afford to lose. She wasn't moving. Daniel's chest tightened. "Hey," he called gently, stopping a few steps away. "Miss?" No response. He took another step forward, lowering his voice. "Hey, can you hear me?" Clara stirred faintly, her brow furrowing as she shifted slightly. A soft, uneven breath escaped her lips as she blinked her eyes open. For a moment, everything was blurred. Lights, shadows, a figure standing in front of her. Then clarity hit. She jerked upright suddenly, her heart racing. "Who?" she gasped, pulling back instinctively. "Please, don't come closer." Her voice was weak but urgent, edged with fear. Daniel immediately stopped, raising his hand slightly in a calm, non-threatening gesture. "Oh, it's okay," he said gently. "You're all right. I'm not here to hurt you." Clara's breathing quickened as she pressed herself against the back of the bench, her fingers gripping the edge tightly. Her eyes scanned him quickly, his posture, his distance, his expression, trying to decide, trying to survive. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "My name's Daniel," he replied softly. "Daniel Hayes." He kept his tone steady, grounded, giving her space, giving her time. "I was just passing through," he continued. "I saw the depot lights and thought I'd check." Clara frowned slightly, confusion mixing with her fear. "At this hour?" she asked. Daniel hesitated for a brief second, then gave a small, honest shrug. "Truth is, I wasn't planning to stop," he admitted. but something told me to turn back. He met her eyes, and not forcefully, but sincerely. I think God sent me. The words hung in the air. Clara stared at him. Part of her wanted to reject it immediately, to guard herself, to protect what little strength she had left. But another part, a quieter, deeper part, paused. Because just hours ago she had whispered a prayer in the dark. Don't leave me here. Her grip on the bench loosened slightly. She swallowed, her voice softer now. I didn't think anyone would come. Daniel nodded slowly. Looks like you've had a long night. Clara let out a shaky breath, her shoulders sagging slightly as the weight of everything returned. I've been here since the last bus, she said. I was waiting for someone. She didn't need to explain more. The silence filled in the rest. Daniel's expression shifted, understanding settling in without judgment. He didn't come back, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Clara shook her head slowly, her eyes dropping. No. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She quickly wiped it away as if trying to hold on to what little dignity she felt she had left. I know how this looks, she added quickly. But I didn't plan. Hey, Daniel interrupted gently, his voice calm but firm. You don't have to explain yourself to me. She looked up at him, surprised. I'm just glad you're okay, he continued. That's what matters. Clara blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of his response. No judgment, no suspicion, just concern. The tension in her chest eased slightly. Still, hesitation lingered. She glanced past him toward the empty road, then back at him. I don't have anywhere to go, she admitted quietly. On the end, the words felt heavy, final. Daniel nodded once, as if he had already expected that answer. Well, he said, you're not staying here. Clara's eyes widened slightly. I can't just... You can, he replied gently, at least for tonight. He gestured toward his truck. I've got a place not too far from here. It's warm, safe. You can rest. Get your bearings in the morning. Clara hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face again. Every instinct told her to be careful. But something else was there, too. Something she couldn't ignore. The memory of her prayer. The quiet peace that had followed. And now, this moment. She looked at Daniel again. Really looked this time. His posture was steady. His eyes honest. His distance respectful. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't pressuring her. Just offering help. Why would you do this? She asked softly. Daniel exhaled, glancing briefly toward the sky before answering. Because once, he said, I was the one sitting in the dark, thinking no one was coming. He met her gaze again. And someone did. The simplicity of his words struck something deep within her. Clara felt her defenses weaken. Not completely, but enough. Enough to take a step forward. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel gave a small, reassuring smile. Okay. He stepped back slightly, giving her space to stand. Clara picked up her suitcase, her movements slow and stiff from the cold. As they walked toward the truck, she glanced back once at the bench, at the place where she had felt most alone. It looked different now, still empty, still cold, but no longer the end of her story. Nay, Daniel opened the passenger door for her, and she climbed in, pulling her cardigan tighter around herself. As he walked around to the driver's side, Clara whispered softly, almost to herself, Thank you. She wasn't sure if she meant Daniel or God, maybe both. The truck engine started, breaking the silence, and as they pulled away from the depot, the flickering lights faded behind them, leaving the darkness and the loneliness farther and farther away. The truck moved steadily down the quiet country road, its headlights stretching long across the darkness ahead. Inside, the heater hummed softly, filling the cab with warmth that slowly began to chase the cold from Clara's bones. She sat quietly in the passenger seat, her suitcase at her feet, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Everything felt unreal. Just an hour ago, she had been lying on a hard bench, alone and forgotten. Now she was in a stranger's truck, driving into the unknown. Clara glanced briefly at Daniel, then quickly looked away. He kept his eyes on the road, his posture relaxed but attentive. He didn't try to fill the silence with unnecessary conversation, and somehow that made it easier for her to breathe. "You can turn the heater up if you're still cold," he said after a moment, his voice calm. Clara shook her head slightly. "No, this is already more than enough. Thank you." Her voice was soft, still carrying traces of exhaustion. Daniel nodded. "All right?" Silence settled again, but it wasn't as heavy as before. Clara leaned back slightly, letting the warmth sink in. Her body began to relax, though her mind was still racing. What am I doing? Can I really trust this? She closed her eyes briefly, taking a slow breath. God, please let this be safe. The truck eventually turned off the main road, gravel crunching beneath the tires, as they entered a long, open stretch of land. Clara opened her eyes and looked out the window. Faint outlines of fences appeared in the distance. A barn, wide fields stretching endlessly under the night sky. Then, finally, a house. Warm light glowed from the windows, soft and inviting against the darkness surrounding it. Daniel slowed the truck as they approached. "Here we are," he said. Clara swallowed, her eyes fixed on the house. It didn't look like a place of danger. It looked like home. The truck came to a stop and Daniel turned off the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Daniel stepped out, walking around to her side and opening the door. You okay?" he asked gently. Clara nodded, though her movements were still hesitant. She stepped down, her legs slightly stiff as her feet touched the ground. The night air here felt different. Quieter. Softer. Safer. Daniel picked up her suitcase before she could protest. "I've got it," he said simply. Clara hesitated, then nodded again. "Thank you." They walked toward the house together, the wooden porch creaking softly under their steps. Daniel opened the door and gestured for her to go in first. Clara paused at the threshold, then slowly stepped inside. Warmth greeted her immediately, not just from the air, but from the space itself. The house was simple but welcoming. A worn couch, a wooden table, a lamp casting a soft golden glow. Everything felt lived in, cared for. Clara looked around quietly, taking it all in. "Nah, it's not much," Daniel said, setting her suitcase down near the door. "But it's home." She shook her head gently. "It's more than I expected." And she meant it. Daniel gave a small nod, then walked toward the kitchen. "I'll get you something warm to eat," he said. "You must be hungry." Claire hadn't even realized it until he said it, but her stomach tightened at the thought. I am," she admitted softly. He smiled faintly. "Sit, I won't be long." Clara lowered herself onto one of the chairs at the table, her hands resting lightly on its surface. She watched as Daniel moved around the kitchen with quiet familiarity, pulling out a pot, lighting the stove, stirring something that soon filled the room with a comforting aroma. For the first time that night, something inside her began to settle. Not completely, but enough. A few minutes later, Daniel placed a bowl of steaming soup in front of her, along with a slice of bread. "Careful," he said. "It's hot." Clara stared at the bowl for a moment, the warmth rising gently into her face. Something about it, so simple, so ordinary, felt overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered. She picked up the spoon slowly and took a small sip. Warmth spread through her instantly, and before she realized it, tears filled her eyes again. Daniel noticed, but didn't make a big deal of it. He simply leaned against the counter, giving her space. "Rough night?" he asked gently. Clara let out a quiet, shaky laugh. "That's one way to put it." She set the spoon down briefly, wiping her eyes. "I just didn't expect—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "Didn't expect kindness?" Daniel finished. She nodded. "Yeah." A small silence followed. And then Clara looked up at him. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again, more quietly this time. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Daniel folded his arms loosely, considering his answer. "You're right," he said. "I don't know you." He paused. "But I know what it feels like to be left with nothing." Clara's gaze softened slightly. Daniel continued, his voice steady but reflective. "There was a time in my life when I made choices that cost me everything. I pushed people away, lost things that mattered." He glanced down briefly, then back at her. "And one night, I found myself sitting alone, wondering if I'd gone too far to come back. Clara listened quietly, her heart tightening at his words. But God didn't leave me there, he said. He sent someone to help me up. He gave a small shrug. I guess this is my turn to do the same. The simplicity of his words settled deeply into Clara's heart. Not dramatic, not complicated, just real. She looked down at her hands. I feel like I lost everything, she admitted. Daniel shook his head gently. Not everything, he said. You're still here. She looked up at him. And as long as you're still here, he added, God's not finished with your story. The words lingered in the room. Clara felt something shift inside her again, like a door cracking open just enough to let light in. She nodded slowly. After she finished eating, Daniel showed her to a small room down the hall. It's not fancy, he said, opening the door. But it's clean. You can rest here. Clara stepped inside. A simple bed, a folded blanket, a small window with curtains gently swaying. It was more than enough. Ah, it's perfect, she said softly. Daniel nodded. Get some rest. We'll figure everything else out in the morning. He turned to leave, then paused. You're safe here, he added. Clara met his eyes, and for the first time since the night began, she believed it. Thank you, Daniel, she said. He gave a small nod, then closed the door quietly behind him. Clara stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle. But this silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. She slowly sat on the edge of the bed, then lay down, pulling the blanket over herself. The warmth wrapped around her like reassurance. Her body relaxed almost instantly, exhaustion finally catching up to her. She stared at the ceiling for a moment, her thoughts quieter now. God, she whispered softly, I didn't see this coming. A small tear slipped down her temple. But thank you. Her eyes slowly closed. And for the first time that night, Clara didn't feel abandoned. She felt carried. And within moments, she drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. Morning came gently. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, spilling soft, golden light across the small room. Dust particles floated lazily in the air, illuminated like tiny sparks of life. Clara stirred beneath the blanket, her brow tightening slightly as she shifted. For a moment, she didn't recognize where she was. The bed was too soft, the air too warm, the silence too peaceful. Her eyes opened slowly. She stared at the ceiling, blinking as awareness returned. The depot, the cold, the fear. Then, the truck, the ranch, Daniel. Clara sat up quickly, the blanket falling slightly from her shoulders. And her heart raced for a brief second as she looked around the room. But everything remained the same, the small bed, the quiet window, the gentle sunlight. It hadn't been a dream. She exhaled slowly, placing a hand over her chest. I'm still here, she whispered. But this time, the words didn't carry fear. They carried relief. Clara swung her legs over the side of the bed, her feet touching the wooden floor. She stood slowly, stretching slightly as the stiffness from the night before eased out of her body. The warmth of the house wrapped around her again, grounding her. She walked toward the window and pulled the curtain aside. The sight that greeted her made her pause. Wide, open land stretched as far as her eyes could see. Fields kissed by morning light, a barn standing strong in the distance, and beyond it, rolling hills painted in soft shades of green and gold. It was quiet, but not empty, alive in a way the depot had never been. Clara swallowed softly. Wow. Something about the view stirred something deep within her, a quiet sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in what felt like forever, her mind wasn't racing ahead in fear. It was still. She closed her eyes briefly. Thank you, she whispered. Not out of desperation this time, but gratitude. A few minutes later, Clara stepped cautiously into the hallway, unsure of what she would find. The faint sound of movement and something cooking led her toward the kitchen. She paused at the doorway. Daniel stood by the stove, flipping something in a pan with quiet focus. Sunlight streamed in from the window behind him, casting a soft glow across the room. He glanced up as he sensed her presence. Morning, he said, a small smile forming. You're up early. Clara hesitated for a second, then stepped in. I didn't want to sleep too long, she said. I wasn't sure what the plan was. Daniel chuckled lightly. Plan is simple, he replied. You eat first. Clara gave a small, uncertain smile. All right. She sat at the table as Daniel placed a plate in front of her. Eggs, toast, and something warm that smelled comforting. Thank you, she said again. Daniel leaned against the counter. You don't have to thank me every 5 minutes, he said gently. Clara looked down at her plate. I know, She paused. I didn't expect any of this. Daniel nodded. Sometimes the things we don't expect are the things we need most. His words settled quietly between them. Clara took a bite, her body relaxing slightly more with each passing moment. After a few minutes, she looked up again. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, she admitted. I left my job. I don't have anywhere to go back to. Not really. Daniel crossed his arms loosely. What did you do before all this? He asked. I was a teacher, Clara said, of primary school. Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. Really? She nodded. I loved it, she added quickly. It wasn't perfect, but it mattered. The kids mattered. A faint smile touched her lips as she spoke. Daniel noticed. You miss it, he said. Claire hesitated, then nodded again. Yeah, I do. Daniel pushed himself off the counter. Well, he said, there's a small school about 15 minutes from here. Not a lot of staff. They're always looking for help. Clara blinked, surprised. You're serious? Yeah, he said. Nothing official right away. But you could stop by, see if it feels right. She looked down at her hands, considering it. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted. That's fair, Daniel replied. But sometimes healing doesn't come from sitting still. Clara looked up at him. Sometimes it comes from stepping back into what God already placed inside you. The words hit deeper than she expected. She sat quietly for a moment, letting them sink in. Then she nodded slowly. Maybe I could try. The school was small, just as Daniel had described. A modest building, slightly worn, filled with the sounds of children laughing, talking, learning. Clara stood outside for a moment before walking in, her heart pounding. What if I can't do this? What if I've lost it? She took a deep breath. Okay, just try. Inside, she was greeted warmly by a teacher who quickly introduced her to the class. Would you mind helping out for a bit? The teacher asked. Clara hesitated for only a second, then nodded. Of course. What started as a bit turned into hours, helping with reading, answering questions, encouraging shy voices to speak up. And somewhere along the way, something shifted. The fear that had followed her began to loosen its grip. The doubt grew quieter, and in its place, joy. Real, genuine joy. A little girl tugged at her sleeve at one point. Miss, can you help me spell this? She asked. Clara knelt beside her, smiling softly. Of course I can. As she guided the child, something inside her clicked back into place. This was who she was, not abandoned, not broken. A teacher, someone who made a difference. That evening, Clara returned to the ranch, her steps lighter than they had been the day before. Daniel looked up from the porch as she approached. Well, he asked. Clara smiled, really smiled. I think, I found something again. Daniel nodded, satisfied. Told you. She sat beside him, looking out over the fields as the sun began to set. I felt like my life ended at that depot, she said quietly. Like everything I'd built just disappeared. Daniel remained silent, letting her speak. But today, she continued, it felt like something started again. She looked down briefly. Not the same thing I thought I was walking in, but something real. Daniel glanced at her. That's how God works sometimes, he said. We think we're losing everything, but he's just redirecting us. Clara nodded slowly. I think you're right. That night, as she knelt beside her bed once more, her prayer was different. No desperation, no confusion, just honesty. Lord, I see it now, she whispered. You didn't abandon me. You protected me. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she was smiling. Thank you for not giving me what I thought I wanted and leading me to what I truly needed. She paused, her voice softening even more. Help me trust you, even when I don't understand the road. Clara climbed into bed, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. The pain wasn't completely gone, but it no longer defined her, because in the place where she had felt most lost, she had begun to find herself again. And more than that, she had found purpose. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills, spilling light across the land like a quiet promise fulfilled. A year had passed, yet to Clara, no, it felt like both a lifetime and just yesterday. She stood outside the small country church, her hands gently clasped in front of her. The soft sound of birds filled the air, and a light breeze brushed against her dress, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth and new beginnings. Easter morning. Again. But everything was different now. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun rest on her face. Last year, this same morning, had found her waking up in uncertainty, broken, abandoned, and questioning everything she believed. Now, she stood whole, not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because God had met her in the brokenness and rebuilt her from within. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" Daniel's voice came gently from behind her. Clara opened her eyes and turned, a soft smile forming. "Yes, yeah," she admitted. "It's hard not to." He stepped up beside her, hands resting casually in his pockets as he looked out over the open land. "Funny how one night can change everything," he said. Clara let out a quiet breath. "That night felt like the end of my life," she said. "I remember thinking, this is it. I've ruined everything." She paused, her eyes drifting toward the horizon. "I had never felt so alone." Daniel nodded, listening. "But now," she continued, her voice softer, steadier, "I can see it differently." She turned slightly toward him. "It wasn't the end. It was the turning point," Daniel said. Clara smiled. "Exactly." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of the past no longer heavy, but meaningful. "Do you ever wonder," Clara said, "what would have happened if you hadn't turned back that night?" Daniel chuckled lightly. "All the time," he admitted. "But I stopped asking that question." Clara raised an eyebrow slightly. "Oh," he nodded. "Because it's not about what would have happened," he said. "It's about what did happen." He glanced at her, and the fact that God knew exactly where you were and exactly how to reach you. Clara's eyes softened. She looked down briefly, then back up. "I used to think faith meant having everything figured out," she said. "Knowing the right path, making the right choices." She shook her head gently. "But that night taught me something different." "What's that?" Daniel asked. Clara took a slow breath. "That faith isn't about having clarity," she said. "It's about holding on, even when everything feels unclear." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's a hard lesson to learn." "It is," she agreed. "But it's also the one that changed everything." The church doors opened behind them, and the sound of people gathering began to fill the air. Laughter, greetings, quiet joy. Clara turned slightly, watching as families walked in together. Children ran ahead, their excitement impossible to hide. For a moment, her heart swelled, because now she was part of something again. Not just surviving, belonging. "Ready?" Daniel asked. Clara nodded. "Yeah." They stepped inside together. The service was simple but full. Songs of hope filled the room, voices rising together in a way that made Clara's chest tighten. Not with pain this time, but with gratitude. She listened as the pastor spoke about resurrection, not just as an event, but as a promise. That no matter how dark the night, he said, the morning will come. Clara lowered her gaze, her heart stirring, because she had lived that truth. She had felt that darkness, and she had seen that morning. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, not out of sorrow, but out of awe. After the service, Clara stepped outside again, the sunlight now brighter, stronger, fully risen. She walked a few steps away from the crowd, needing a moment to breathe, a moment to remember. Her eyes drifted toward the distant road, the one that led far beyond the hills, beyond the town, toward the place she had once been left behind. The depot. It felt like another life now, another version of herself. The girl who had sat on that cold bench, believing her story was over. Clara placed a hand over her heart. "You made it," she whispered softly. "Not to the past. But through it." Footsteps approached behind her. "Hey," Daniel said gently. You disappeared. Clara turned, smiling. Just needed a moment. He nodded. I get that. She looked at him for a second, her expression shifting, softening into something deeper. Daniel. Yeah? She hesitated briefly, then spoke. Thank you. For that night. He smiled faintly. I didn't do much. Clara shook her head. You listened, she said. You showed up. She paused. That changed everything. Daniel looked down briefly, then back at her. God did the real work, he said. Clara nodded. I know, she replied, but he used you. A quiet understanding passed between them, not needing to be explained, not needing to be rushed, just there. The wind moved gently across the fields, carrying the sound of distant laughter and life. Clara turned her gaze outward once more, her heart steady. I used to think being abandoned defined me, she said. Daniel listened. But now I see it differently, she continued. It wasn't my identity. She smiled softly. It was just the place where God found me. Daniel's expression warmed. That's a good way to see it. Clara took a deep breath, the air filling her lungs with something new. Not fear, not uncertainty, but peace. Real peace. She looked out across the land one last time, her voice soft but certain. I wasn't forsaken, she said. I was being led. The sun shone brightly overhead now, no longer hidden, no longer distant. A new day, a new chapter, a living testimony. And as Clara stood there, no longer the girl abandoned at a depot, but a woman restored in faith and purpose, she knew this truth with all her heart. God had never left her. Not for a moment. And he never would.